She was a nobody, a waitress scraping by on tips and stale coffee. He was the heir to the city's most violent empire. Their worlds should never have touched. But when a quiet Tuesday shift turned into a bloodbath, Ilara Vance didn't run. She threw herself in front of a bullet to save a child she didn't even know. She expected to die on that dirty diner floor. Instead, she woke up in silk sheets, inside a fortress, with a massive diamond on her finger. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was Mrs. Lorenzo Valenti. But in the Mafia, a wedding ring isn't a promise of love, it's a target. Get ready for a story of blood, betrayal, and a passion dangerous enough to burn the city down. The neon sign of Joe's all-night diner buzzed with an irritating insect-like hum, flickering against the relentless New York rain. Inside, the air smelled of grease, pine-scented cleaner, and the damp wool of the late-night crowd. Ilara Vance wiped down the counter for the 50th time that night, her movements mechanical. At 24, her life was a series of calculations. 3 shifts a week at Joe's covered rent in her shoebox apartment in Queens. 2 shifts at the library covered tuition. The remaining $17 in her tip jar would hopefully cover groceries, provided she stuck to ramen and apples. "Hey, Ilara, top me off." She forced a smile for Mr. Henderson, a regular who tipped in nickels. "Coming right up, Earl." As she poured the black coffee, the bell above the door chimed. It wasn't the usual drunk stumbling in from the dive bar next door, nor was it a trucker looking for pie. A boy walked in. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old. The atmosphere in the diner shifted subtly, a primal instinct rippling through the room. The boy was dressed in a miniature navy peacoat that likely cost more than Ilara's entire tuition. His hair was slicked back, dark as oil, and his eyes, terrified, wide and intelligent, darted around the room. He was clutching a teddy bear that looked worn, the only ordinary thing about him. He didn't look at the menu. He looked at the door behind him. Ilara felt a cold prickle on the back of her neck. She set the coffee pot down. "Hey there, sweetie," she said, her voice dropping to a gentle hush. "You lost?" The boy didn't answer. He scrambled onto a stool at the far end of the counter, trying to make himself small. Ilara wiped her hands on her apron and started moving toward him. But the bell chimed again. This time, the door didn't just open, it was shoved with force. 2 men entered. They wore rain-slicked leather jackets and heavy boots. They didn't look like customers. They looked like predators. One of them, a man with a jagged scar running through his eyebrow, scanned the room until his gaze locked on the small boy in the peacoat. The boy whimpered. It was a sound so small, so filled with pure, distilled terror, that it shattered Ilara's paralysis. "There he is," Scar-Eye muttered, reaching into his jacket. Time warped. It became something thick and viscous, like syrup. Ilara saw the glint of blue steel as the gun cleared the leather jacket. She saw the boy squeeze his eyes shut, hugging the bear. She saw Mr. Henderson drop his coffee mug, the ceramic shattering in slow motion. Ilara didn't think. She didn't calculate her tuition or her rent. She simply moved. She vaulted over the counter, her sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. "Get down!" she screamed, though the sound felt trapped in her throat. The gun cracked, a deafening, thunderous boom in the small space. Ilara launched herself, her body colliding with the boy's small frame, tackling him off the stool and onto the dirty floor, just as the air where his head had been hissed with the heat of a bullet. They hit the ground hard. Ilara curled around him, a human shield of denim and apron. Bang! Bang! 2 more shots. Pain, white-hot and searing, exploded in her left shoulder. It felt like being struck by a sledgehammer made of fire. "Stay down," she gasped, pressing the boy's face into her chest. Her uniform was wet, but not from the rain. "Don't! Look!" The door chimed again, shouting, more gunfire, but this time it sounded different, heavier, rhythmic, controlled, the sound of bodies hitting the floor. "Leo! Leo!" A deep, baritone voice roared, filled with a terrifying mixture of panic and rage. The boy in her arms sobbed. "Papa!" Ilara's vision began to blur at the edges. The ceiling fan was spinning too fast. A man dropped to his knees beside them. He smelled of expensive cologne, santal and cedarwood, and gunpowder. Expensive leather shoes filled her fading vision. "She's hit," the deep voice growled. "Get the car, now!" Large, rough hands touched her. They were gentle, surprisingly so. "I've got you," the voice said. It was the last thing she heard before the darkness swallowed her whole. Waking up was not a singular event, but a series of confusing, disjointed moments. First, there was the smell. It didn't smell like a hospital. Hospitals smelled of antiseptic and sickness. This room smelled of fresh lilies and sterile, conditioned air. Then, the feeling. Sheets that felt like water against her skin, Egyptian cotton, high thread count. Not the scratchy polyester of the county hospital. Ilara blinked her eyes open. The light was dim, filtering through heavy velvet curtains. She tried to sit up, but a sharp tug in her shoulder made her gasp. She looked down. Her left arm was immobilized in a sleek, black sling. An IV line ran into her right hand, but the machinery it was attached to was silent and modern, lacking the rhythmic beeping of standard medical gear. She looked around. This wasn't a room. It was a suite. Mahogany wainscoting, a fireplace with a low, crackling fire, and a ceiling painted with a fresco that looked vaguely Renaissance. "Where?" Her voice was a dry croak. She shifted her hand to push herself up, and something heavy clinked against the glass of water on the bedside table. Ilara froze. She lifted her right hand. There, resting on her ring finger, was a diamond. It was an emerald cut, massive and flawless, flanked by two smaller baguettes set in platinum. It was heavy. It was beautiful. It looked like it cost more than the entire block she grew up on. "I see you're awake." The voice came from the shadows near the fireplace. A man stepped forward. He was tall, imposing, wearing a charcoal three-piece suit that fit him with the precision of armor. He had dark hair, slightly graying at the temples, and eyes the color of cold espresso. He was undeniably handsome, but in the way a tiger is beautiful, terrifyingly so. It was the man from the diner. The voice. "Who are you?" Ilara rasped, clutching the sheet to her chest. "Where am I?" "I am Lorenzo Valenti," he said, his voice smooth, carrying a faint, unplaceable accent. "And you are in my home, in the Hamptons. You have been unconscious for 3 days." Valenti. The name hit her like a physical blow. Even a waitress who kept her head down knew that name. The Valenti family ran the shipping docks, the construction unions, and half the politicians in New York. They were the Mafia. Panic spiked in her chest. "I need to leave. I have work. My rent—" "Your rent has been paid for the next 5 years," Lorenzo said, stepping closer. He didn't smile. "Your tuition at NYU has been paid in full. Your landlord has been informed you are on an extended sabbatical." Ilara stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Why?" Lorenzo stopped at the foot of the bed. His expression softened, just a fraction. "Because you saved my son, Leonardo. You took a bullet meant for his heart." The memory rushed back. The boy, the gun, the burning pain. "Is he okay?" she asked softly. "He is physically unharmed thanks to you. He is shaken." but alive. Lorenzo gripped the footboard of the bed, his knuckles turning white. I owe you a debt I cannot repay with money, Miss Vance. However, there is a complication. Elara looked down at her hand again. The ring glittered under the chandelier light, mocking her. What is this? She whispered, holding up her hand. Why am I wearing this? Lorenzo sighed, a sound of heavy weariness. He walked to the side of the bed and poured her a glass of water from a crystal carafe. The men who attacked you, they are from the Cipriani family. Rivals. They broke the oldest rule. Never touch the children. He handed her the glass. When my men extracted you from the diner, the paparazzi and onlookers were already there. A photo was taken. Of me carrying you. Of you bleeding. Elara took the glass with a trembling hand. So the media began to ask who the woman was that the Don of the Valenti family carried out with his own hands. If they know you are just a waitress, a civilian, the Ciprianis will finish the job they started. They will torture you to get to me, or kill you just to send a message that no one is safe around me. He paused, his dark eyes locking onto hers. To protect you, I had to make you untouchable. In my world, there is only one class of people the rival families hesitate to touch without starting an all-out war. Family. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. You don't mean... I released a statement this morning, Lorenzo said, his voice devoid of emotion. The press believes we have been seeing each other in secret for 6 months. They believe we eloped 3 days ago, just before the attack. He pointed to a folded newspaper on the nightstand. The headline screamed, Valenti Boss weds mystery heroine in secret ceremony. I forged the marriage certificate, Lorenzo said calmly. Legally, on paper, and in the eyes of every killer in New York. You are my wife. Elara dropped the glass. It didn't break on the thick Persian rug, but water soaked into the expensive wool. You married me without my consent, she shouted, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. You can't do that. This is insanity. I'm going to the police. Lorenzo laughed, a dry, humorless sound. The police commissioner was a guest at my estate last weekend, Elara. The police cannot help you. And if you leave this house, the Ciprianis will put a bullet in your head before you reach the subway station. He leaned in, placing a hand on the mattress near her hip. The intrusion into her space was electric and terrifying. I know this is not the life you chose, but it is the life you have now. You stay here. You play the role of the loving stepmother to my son, who, by the way, has been asking for you every hour, and you live in luxury. You are safe. You are a Valenti. And if I refuse? Elara challenged, though her voice shook. Lorenzo straightened up, buttoning his suit jacket. Then you walk out that door, and you are dead by sunset. The choice is yours, Mrs. Valenti. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Dinner is at 7. Dress formally. We have guests coming to pay their respects to the newlyweds. The heavy oak door clicked shut, leaving Elara alone with the silence, the pain in her shoulder, and the diamond that felt heavier than a shackle. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a prisoner in a golden cage, married to the devil himself. For an hour after Lorenzo left, Elara sat frozen, staring at the Persian rug where the water stain was slowly drying. The reality of her situation settled over her like a lead blanket. She was trapped. The NYPD, the tuition payments, the fake marriage certificate. Lorenzo Valenti had woven a web so tight she couldn't even see the gaps, let alone squeeze through them. She finally moved when a soft knock sounded on the door. It opened to reveal an older woman with severe grey hair, pulled back in a tight bun, dressed in a stark black housekeeper's uniform. Mrs. Valenti, the woman said, the title making Elara flinch. "I am Eleanor. Mr. Valenti has instructed me to help you prepare for dinner. The doctor is also here to check your dressing." "I can dress myself," Elara said, her voice stronger than she felt. "With one arm in a sling?" "I doubt it," Elena said, not unkindly, but with a firmness that brokered no argument. "The doctor first." The checkup was quick and professional. The doctor, a nervous man named Dr. Albright, who smelled faintly of scotch, changed the dressing on her shoulder. The wound was angry and ugly, a jagged reminder of the diner floor. Once he left, Elena opened a set of double doors on the far side of the room that Elara hadn't noticed. Elara gasped. It wasn't a closet, it was a boutique. Rack after rack of clothing stretched out, organized by color and occasion. There were silks, cashmeres, and imported wools. She saw labels she'd only read about in magazines left behind by wealthy customers at the diner. Gucci, Versace, Dior. "Mr. Valenti had a personal shopper curate a wardrobe based on your sizes," Elena explained dryly. "He wasn't sure of your taste, so he bought everything." "This is ridiculous," Elara muttered, touching the sleeve of a sapphire blue silk blouse. It felt like spun water. "I can't wear any of this. It's not me." "It is now," Elena said. "Tonight is about appearance. You need to look like the wife of the Don, not a victim." Elena pulled out an emerald green evening gown. It was sleek, structured, with a high slit up the leg and a neckline that would accommodate her sling. It looked like armor disguised as fashion. Getting dressed was a humiliating exercise in surrender. Elena helped her navigate the silk around her injured arm, stepping back to appraise her work. The woman in the floor-to-ceiling mirror was unrecognizable to Elara. The gown skimmed her curves, the rich color making her pale skin look porcelain, and her red hair look spun from fire. The sling, now covered in matching black silk, looked almost avant-garde. And on her finger, the massive Valenti diamond glittered coldly. She looked expensive. She looked powerful. She looked terrifyingly out of place. "He's waiting in the library," Elena said. "But first, someone wants to see you." Elena stepped into the hallway and motioned with her head. A moment later, a small figure shuffled into the room. It was Leo. He looked different without the oversized peacoat, dressed now in soft trousers and a knit sweater. He still clutched the worn teddy bear. His large, dark eyes, Lorenzo's eyes, locked onto Elara. He stopped 10 feet away, uncertain. Elara forgot the silk, the diamond, and the fear. She slowly knelt down, wincing as her shoulder protested the movement, bringing herself to his eye level. "Hey, tough guy," she whispered. Leo didn't speak. He just stared, his lower lip trembling. He was looking at her sling. "It's okay," she said softly. "It's just a scratch. Doctors fix me right up." "Papa said—" Leo's voice was tiny, raspy from crying. "Papa said the bad men hurt you because I was too slow." Elara's heart broke. She reached out with her good hand. "No, sweetie. No, you were so brave. You were the bravest boy in the whole city." The floodgates opened. Leo dropped the bear and ran to her, slamming into her good side, burying his face in her neck. He smelled of milk and tear-free shampoo. He was shaking violently. "I was scared," he sobbed into her expensive dress. "It was so loud." Elara wrapped her good arm tightly around him, resting her cheek on his dark hair. The artificial world of the Valentis faded away. This was real. This traumatized little boy was real. "I know," she soothed, rocking him slightly. "I was scared too, but we're okay. You're safe now." She looked up and saw Lorenzo standing in the doorway. He had changed into a tuxedo, looking devastatingly sharp. He was watching them, his expression unreadable, a muscle ticking in his jaw as he looked at his son clinging to the strange woman who had saved his life. For a moment, the ruthless Mafia Don looked almost helpless. Leo sniffled and pulled back, wiping his nose on his sleeve. He looked at Elara with total, unwavering trust. "Are you staying?" Elara felt Lorenzo's gaze burning into her. She thought of the contract, the threat, the golden cage. Then she looked at Leo's tear-stained face. "Yeah, Leo," she whispered, brushing hair out of his eyes. "I'm staying for a while." The library was vast, smelling of old leather and expensive scotch. Lorenzo poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass and handed it to Elara. "Drink. It will help with the nerves and the pain." Elara took it with her good hand. The diamond clinked against the glass. She took a sip. It burned, pleasantly going down, settling the tremors in her stomach. Lorenzo scanned her from head to toe. His eyes gave nothing away, no approval or lust, just a cold assessment of an asset. "The dress works. You look the part." "Which part is that?" she asked, feeling the alcohol embolden her slightly. "The loving wife, or the human shield?" Lorenzo stepped closer, invading her personal space. The scent of his cedarwood cologne was intoxicating, overwhelming. He reached out and adjusted the strap of her sling, his knuckles brushing the bare skin of her collarbone. The touch sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with fear. "Tonight, they are the same thing," he murmured, his voice low and rough. "Listen to me closely, Elara. The men downstairs are my captains. They are loyal, but they are wolves. They smell weakness. If they sense that our marriage is a sham, they will see it as vulnerability. And in my world, vulnerability gets you killed." He gripped her chin gently, tilting her face up to his. His eyes were dark pits, endless and terrifying. "You must convince them that you love me. More importantly, you must convince them that I love you, that an attack on you is a personal attack on my heart. Do you understand?" Elara's breath hitched. His touch was firm, possessing. "I understand." "Good. Stay by my side. Speak only when spoken to. If you feel overwhelmed, squeeze my arm. Do not show fear." He released her chin. "Shall we, my dear?" He offered his arm, the side away from her injury. She took it. His bicep felt like granite beneath the expensive wool of his tuxedo. They descended the grand staircase. The foyer below was filled with the low hum of male voices. As they reached the bottom step, the conversation died instantly. 12 men stood in the marble foyer. They were all dressed in expensive suits, ranging in age from 40 to 70. Some looked like respectable bankers, others looked exactly like what they were, killers in costume. "Gentlemen," Lorenzo's voice boomed, resonant and authoritative, "I present my wife, Elara Valenti." There was a beat of silence, thick with judgment. Then, as one, the men bowed their heads slightly in respect. "Don Valenti, Donna Elara," an older man with silver hair at the front said smoothly. "Congratulations. A surprise, but a welcome one. We were all relieved to hear of your recovery." "Thank you, Salvatore," Lorenzo said, guiding Elara toward the dining room. The table stretched the length of the room, set with gold-rimmed china and enough silverware to confuse royalty. Dinner was an ordeal. The food was exquisite. Truffle risotto, filet mignon, but Elara could barely taste it. She felt 12 pairs of eyes dissecting her every move. Lorenzo sat at the head, with Elara at his right hand. His presence was dominating. He commanded the room without raising his voice. Throughout the meal, Lorenzo played his part perfectly. He would rest his hand casually on the back of her chair, or brush a stray hair from her cheek while speaking to his underbosses about shipping lanes and union disputes. His touch was possessive, staking a claim for all to see. Elara tried her best to reciprocate. She smiled weakly when he made a dry joke. She leaned slightly into his touch. It felt like a high-wire act without a net. The tension ratcheted up during the espresso course. A man sitting halfway down the table leaned forward. He was younger than the others, maybe 35, with slicked-back hair and eyes that looked too wet, like a reptile's. His name was Marco, and Elara had caught him staring at her chest multiple times. "So, Mrs. Valenti," Marco started, his voice oily. Quite a Cinderella story. From slinging hash at an all-night diner to sitting at the Don's table in the Hamptons in 1 week. Must be quite the adjustment. The table went dead silent. It was a direct insult, thinly veiled as small talk. Elara froze, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. Lorenzo didn't move, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Elara is a woman of remarkable resilience, Marco," Lorenzo said softly. Too softly. Something the Cipriani hitmen discovered when she put herself between their bullets and my son. Marco chuckled nervously. "Of course, boss. Very brave. It just seems sudden. A love match, so quickly." He looked at Elara, a nasty smirk playing on his lips. "Tell us, Elara, what was it that attracted you to Lorenzo? His charming personality or his bank account?" It was a test. Marco was pushing, seeing if the waitress would crack, seeing if Lorenzo would let him get away with disrespecting her. Elara's blood ran cold, then hot. She thought of Leo sobbing in her arms upstairs. She thought of the scar on her shoulder. She set her cup down with a sharp click that echoed in the silence. She looked Marco dead in the eye. "What attracted me, Marco, was seeing a man who would burn the world down to protect his child, a quality I find lacking in most men these days." She paused, letting her gaze drift over the other men at the table before landing back on Marco. "As for the bank account, I haven't had to use it yet. My husband takes very good care of me." A flicker of surprise passed through Marco's eyes. He hadn't expected her to bite back. Lorenzo slowly turned his head toward Marco. The look on the Don's face was terrifying. It was the look of a predator deciding exactly where to sink its teeth. "Marco," Lorenzo said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the wood of the table. "You seem confused about the nature of this evening. This is a celebration of my marriage, not an interrogation of my wife." He stood up slowly. He didn't look at Elara. His entire focus was on the insolent underboss. "Apologize to Donna Elara. Now." Marco paled. He realized too late he had crossed a fatal line. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the wood floor. "My apologies, Donna Elara," he mumbled, looking at his shoes. "I meant no disrespect. It was a poor joke." "Sit down," Lorenzo commanded. Marco sat instantly. Lorenzo remained standing, his gaze sweeping the table. "Let there be no confusion," he stated, his voice icy crystal. "This woman carries my name. She carries my blood on her skin from saving my heir. She is Valenti. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. And you all know the penalty for that." The silence that followed was absolute. The message was received. Elara wasn't just a prop. She was under the ultimate protection. Lorenzo sat back down and placed his warm, heavy hand over Elara's trembling left hand, covering the diamond with his palm. "Dessert," he said calmly to the hovering waiters. As the staff moved in with silver trays, Lorenzo leaned close to Elara's ear, his breath warm against her neck. "Well done, wife," he whispered. Elara shivered. She had survived the lion's den, but she realized with dawning horror that the most dangerous beast in the jungle was the one holding her hand. 3 weeks had passed since the dinner from hell. Life in the Valenti estate had settled into a strange, suffocating rhythm. Elara's shoulder had healed enough to shed the sling, leaving behind a puckered pink scar that she traced in the mirror every morning, a permanent reminder that her old life was dead. She had become a ghost in a mansion of secrets. She spent her days with Leo, reading to him in the library or playing chess, a game the 7-year-old was prodigiously good at. Lorenzo was a phantom, appearing only for dinner, smelling of cigars and gunpowder, his eyes always scanning the perimeter, never resting on her for too long. But tonight was different. Tonight was the annual Venetian charity gala at the Plaza Hotel. It was the biggest social event of the season, and more importantly, it was neutral ground where the 5 families pretended to be civilized over champagne and caviar. "Hold still," Elena muttered, pinning a diamond brooch into Elara's hair. Elara stared at her reflection. The dress Lorenzo had chosen was a weapon in itself, a floor-length gown of midnight blue velvet, backless and long-sleeved, fitting her like a second skin. A mask of silver filigree and sapphire sat on the vanity table. "Do I really have to go?" Elara asked, her stomach churning. "The Don cannot appear weak," Elena said, her voice softer than usual. "A man who hides his wife is a man who fears for her safety. If he parades you, it shows he is untouchable." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lorenzo entered. He stopped dead in his tracks. He was wearing a tuxedo that was cut to perfection, a black silk mask already in his hand. But his eyes were fixed on Elara with an intensity that made the air in the room feel thin. For the first time, he didn't look at her like an asset. He looked at her like a man starving. "You look—" He cleared his throat, a rare crack in his armor. "Adequate." Elara smirked, grabbing her silver clutch. High praise from the boss. The drive to the city was silent, the armored limousine cutting through the rain. Lorenzo's hand rested on his knee, clenching and unclenching. "Stay with me," he said as the car slowed. "Do not go to the restroom alone. Do not accept drinks from anyone but the bar. If the music stops, you drop to the floor." "Romantic," Elara deadpanned. "I am not trying to romance you, Elara. I am trying to keep you alive." Inside, the ballroom was a sea of masks and jewels. The air smelled of expensive perfume and hidden malice. As they walked in, heads turned. Whispers hissed like snakes behind fans. The waitress, the hero, the wife. Lorenzo placed a hand on the small of her back. The heat of his palm burned through the velvet. They danced, a waltz that felt more like a battle. Lorenzo moved with surprising grace, guiding her effortlessly through the crowd. "They are all watching," he whispered in her ear, pulling her flush against him. "Let them watch," Elara whispered back, her confidence surprising even herself. "I'm not afraid of them. I took a bullet, remember?" Lorenzo pulled back slightly, his dark eyes searching hers behind the silver mask. "I remember. Every night." The moment was shattered by a man approaching them. It was Salvatore, the silver-haired underboss from the dinner, wearing a gold mask. "Don Valenti." "Donna Elara." Salvatore nodded respectfully. "A beautiful evening. But there is urgent business. The union rep is in the smoking room. He is asking for more." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He looked at Elara. "I will be 10 minutes. Stand by the bar. Do not move." "I'm not a child, Lorenzo. Go." He hesitated, then squeezed her hand and vanished into the crowd with Salvatore. Elara stood by the marble bar, sipping sparkling water. She scanned the room, her paranoia heightened by Lorenzo's warnings. She saw a waiter move too quickly, a couple arguing too quietly. Then she saw him. A waiter was cutting through the crowd, carrying a tray of champagne. But he wasn't looking at the guests. He was looking at the smoking room door where Lorenzo had just exited. His hand was reaching under his serving towel. It was a movement Ilara recognized. She had seen it in a diner 3 weeks ago. The gun. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. She didn't think. She didn't scream. She scanned the room for Lorenzo. He was standing by a pillar, deep in conversation with Salvatore. The waiter was coming up behind him, the gun now visible, a silenced pistol. Ilara moved. She threw her heavy crystal glass at a passing server, shattering a tower of champagne flutes with a deafening crash. Crash! The music stopped. The room froze. Lorenzo spun around at the noise, his hand instinctively going to his hip. The distraction worked. The assassin, startled by the crash, hesitated for a split second. In that second, Lorenzo saw the gun. Pop, pop. Lorenzo fired 2 shots from his own concealed weapon before the assassin could raise his arm. The attacker dropped to the floor, dead before he hit the marble. Screams erupted. Chaos. "Ilara!" Lorenzo roared, scanning the panic-stricken crowd. "I'm here!" She ran toward him, kicking off her heels to move faster. But as she reached him, another figure emerged from the crowd. Not an assassin, but a police officer in uniform. Then another, and another. The doors burst open, and a dozen SWAT team members flooded the room. "NYPD! Everybody down!" Lorenzo grabbed Ilara, pulling her behind the thick marble pillar. "It's a set-up," he hissed. "Not a hit. A raid." "But you own the police commissioner," Ilara cried. "Not the feds," Lorenzo growled, looking at the tactical gear. "This is FBI. Someone gave them the books. Someone gave them everything." He looked at Salvatore, who was standing next to them, looking pale. "Salvatore, get the car to the back exit," Lorenzo commanded. Salvatore nodded and ran. "Come on." Lorenzo grabbed Ilara's hand. They didn't run toward the exit. They ran toward the kitchens. They burst through the swinging doors, startling the chefs. Lorenzo navigated the labyrinth of stainless steel like he had memorized the blueprints. They exited into a wet, garbage-strewn alleyway. "Where is the car?" Ilara gasped, the cold air hitting her exposed back. The alley was empty. No limousine, no Salvatore. Just a black van idling at the end of the block, its headlights off. "He's not coming," Lorenzo said, his voice deadly calm. He pulled Ilara behind a dumpster, just as the side door of the van slid open, and automatic gunfire chewed up the brick wall where they had been standing a second ago. "Salvatore!" Lorenzo spat the name like a curse. He didn't call the car, he called the cleanup crew. They survived the alley by a miracle and a heavy dose of violence. Lorenzo had returned fire, suppressing the shooters long enough for them to break a window and scramble into the basement of a neighboring laundromat. They had moved through the sewers, a humiliating, filthy trek that ruined the velvet dress and the tuxedo, until they emerged in Hell's Kitchen, miles away from the chaos. Now, they were in a safe house. It was a small, dusty apartment above a failing bakery, stocked with nothing but medical supplies, canned food, and weapons. Ilara sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, shivering. She was covered in grime, her feet bleeding, her expensive dress torn. Lorenzo was pacing the small room, stripping off his ruined jacket and unbuttoning his blood-stained shirt. He was a caged animal, vibrating with rage. "Salvatore," he muttered again, pacing. "He's been with my father since before I was born. He held me at my baptism." "He set you up," Ilara said quietly. She wasn't shaking anymore. The shock had faded, replaced by a cold clarity. At the party, he led you away. He distracted you so the shooter could get close, and when that failed, he called the feds to flush you out into the alley. Lorenzo stopped pacing. He turned to look at her. He looked exhausted, the adrenaline crash hitting him hard. He walked over to her and knelt down, much like she had done for Leo weeks ago. He took her bruised feet in his large, rough hands. He didn't speak. He just found a wet cloth from the bathroom and began to gently wipe away the dirt and blood from her soles. The act was so intimate, so subservient, that it stole the breath from Ilara's lungs. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Lorenzo looked up, his eyes dark and unguarded. "Because you saved me tonight. Again. You saw the shooter before I did. You caused the distraction." He finished cleaning her feet and sat back on his heels, resting his hands on her knees. "I pulled you into this hell, Ilara. I forced you to marry me. I threatened you. And yet, you fight for me. You fight for my son." He shook his head as if he couldn't understand it. "Why didn't you let the shooter take me? You would have been free." Ilara looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the burden of the crown he wore, the loneliness of a king who couldn't trust his own knights. "Because Leo needs a father," she said softly. "And because I don't think you're the monster you pretend to be, Lorenzo." Lorenzo stood up slowly, the air between them shifting, charging with electricity. He reached out and touched her cheek, his thumb tracing her jawline. "I am a monster, Ilara," he whispered, leaning in. "But for you, I would be a man." He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, fueled by the brush with death and the rage of betrayal. It tasted of rain and danger. Ilara didn't pull away. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, needing to feel the life in him, the heat of him. For an hour, the war outside didn't exist. There was only the safe house, the dust, and two people clinging to each other in the wreckage of their lives. Later, as Ilara lay awake watching the shadows on the ceiling, Lorenzo sat by the window, cleaning his gun. The intimacy had broken the barrier between them, but the reality of their situation was crashing back in. "We have a problem," Lorenzo said, not looking at her. "Salvatore isn't just a traitor. He's the key holder. He knows the location of every safe house, every account, and Leo's location." Ilara shot up in bed, clutching the sheet. "Leo, but he's at the estate, with the guards." "Salvatore controls the guard rotation," Lorenzo said, his voice cracking. "If Salvatore has flipped to the Ciprianis, he will open the gates for them." Ilara scrambled out of bed, ignoring her soreness. "We have to go. Now." "We can't," Lorenzo said, checking the magazine of his pistol. "The city is swarming with feds and Cipriani hitmen. If we step outside, we're dead. I have to call my loyalists, but I don't know who is left." "Think," Ilara pleaded, grabbing his arm. "Is there anyone Salvatore doesn't control? Anyone outside the system?" Lorenzo looked at her, his eyes narrowing. "There is one person. My estranged brother. Dante." "Why is he estranged?" "Because he is crazy," Lorenzo said grimly. "He runs the underground fighting rings in the Bronx. He hates me. He hates the family business, but he hates the Ciprianis more." "Call him," Ilara urged. "I can't. He doesn't use phones. We have to go to him." "Then we go," Ilara said, grabbing her torn dress. "We go to the Bronx. We get your crazy brother, and we save your son." Lorenzo looked at her with a mixture of awe and fear. "You realize if we walk into Dante's territory, he might kill me himself?" "He can try," Ilara said, tying her hair back, her eyes flashing with a ferocity that matched his own. "But he'll have to get through me first." Lorenzo actually smiled, a small, dangerous curve of his lips. "Mrs. Valenti," he said, handing her a spare pistol. "I think I finally married the right woman." The Bronx at 304M was a different world from the manicured lawns of the Hamptons. It was a world of concrete, steam, and shadows. Lorenzo navigated the stolen sedan to an abandoned meatpacking plant near the river. The thumping bass of heavy metal music vibrated through the ground before they even reached the door. "Stay behind me," Lorenzo warned, checking his weapon one last time. "Dante is unpredictable." They pushed through the heavy iron doors into the pit. It was an underground fighting ring, filled with smoke, the smell of sweat, and the roar of 100 men betting on two giants pummeling each other in a chain-link cage. Lorenzo walked through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. Men stopped cheering and turned to stare. They recognized the cut of his suit, even ruined as it was. They recognized the face of the Don. A man sitting on a throne-like chair made of welded car parts stood up. He was the mirror image of Lorenzo, but distorted. Where Lorenzo was polished marble, Dante was jagged obsidian. He was covered in tattoos, his shirt unbuttoned, a scar running down his neck. "Well, well," Dante shouted over the music, spreading his arms wide. "The prince of the city descends to the sewers. Did you get lost, brother? Or did you finally run out of friends?" "I need your help, Dante," Lorenzo said, his voice cutting through the noise. Dante laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He hopped down from the platform. "You need my help, you who exiled me, you who said I was too wild for the family." He circled Lorenzo, ignoring Elara. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't let the Ciprianis peel your skin off." "Because they have Leo." Elara stepped forward. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. Dante stopped circling. He looked at Elara, really seeing her for the first time. He looked at the dried blood on her dress, the gun tucked into her waistband, and the fire in her eyes. "Who is this?" Dante asked, amused. "This is my wife," Lorenzo said. "Fake wife," Elara corrected. "But the boy is real. Salvatore betrayed us. He let the Ciprianis into the estate. They have your nephew Dante, a 7-year-old boy who has never done anything to anyone." Dante's amusement vanished. The chaotic energy in his eyes hardened into cold fury. In the Valenti bloodline, hatred for each other was strong, but the rule of blood was absolute. "Salvatore!" Dante spat on the concrete. "I always knew that snake had no spine." He turned to the crowd of fighters, men with broken noses, cauliflower ears, and nothing to lose. "Boys!" Dante roared. "The fight is over. Pack your gear. We're going to the Hamptons. We're going hunting." The siege of Valenti Manor. The sun was just beginning to bleed grey light over the horizon when the convoy of battered trucks and motorcycles roared up the long driveway of the Valenti estate. The Cipriani guards at the gate didn't stand a chance. Dante's crew didn't use tactics. They used brute force. They rammed the gates with a reinforced truck, pouring out with baseball bats, chains, and shotguns. Lorenzo and Elara didn't wait for the skirmish. While Dante's men drew the fire of the perimeter guards, Lorenzo led Elara through the servants' entrance he had used as a child. The house was quiet, a deadly, ominous silence. The bodies of Lorenzo's loyal guards littered the hallway. Lorenzo stepped over them, his face a mask of stone, but Elara could feel the tremors of rage radiating off him. "Upstairs," Lorenzo whispered. "The nursery." They moved tactically, clearing corners. Elara held the gun Lorenzo gave her with 2 hands, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Please let him be alive. Please." They reached the heavy oak doors of the nursery. Lorenzo didn't knock. He kicked the door open, his gun raised. "Drop it, Lorenzo!" The shout came from the far corner. Salvatore stood there, sweating, his eyes wild. He had one arm wrapped around Leo's neck, a pistol pressed to the boy's temple. Leo was sobbing silently, clutching his teddy bear, his feet dangling off the ground. Salvatore. Lorenzo lowered his gun slowly, holding up his other hand. Let the boy go. This is between us. It's over, Lorenzo, Salvatore screamed. The Ciprianis promised me the city. They said you were weak, soft, playing house with a waitress. You're right, Lorenzo said, stepping forward inch by inch. I was distracted, but I'm here now. Look at me, Salvatore. Look at your Don. Stay back. Salvatore pressed the gun harder into Leo's skin. Leo winced. Elara was standing in the doorway, partially hidden by the frame. Salvatore was focused entirely on Lorenzo. He didn't see her. She looked at Leo. The boy's eyes found hers. He looked terrified, but when he saw her, a flicker of recognition passed through his panic. Elara remembered the game they played, statues. She locked eyes with Leo and slowly put a finger to her lips. Then she mouthed the word, drop. It was a gamble, a terrible, reckless gamble. But Leo was smart, and he trusted her. Now, Leo, she screamed. Leo went dead weight. He slumped down, pulling his small body downward. Salvatore, surprised by the sudden shift in weight, stumbled slightly, his aim wavering as he tried to pull the boy back up. That split second was all Elara needed. She didn't try to shoot Salvatore in the head. She wasn't a sniper. She aimed for the largest target she could see. Bang! The shot hit Salvatore in the shoulder. He screamed, dropping the gun and releasing Leo. Run, Leo! Lorenzo roared. Leo scrambled across the floor toward Elara. She scooped him up, spinning him out of the room just as Lorenzo opened fire. 3 shots. Chest, chest, head. Salvatore collapsed against the toy chest, his ambition and his betrayal bleeding out onto the hardwood floor. Silence returned to the room, heavy and ringing. Lorenzo stood over the body for a moment, his chest heaving. Then he turned. The monster vanished, replaced by the father. He fell to his knees as Elara and Leo ran to him. He wrapped his massive arms around both of them, burying his face in Leo's neck, crushing them into a singular, trembling embrace. I've got you, Lorenzo whispered, his voice breaking. I've got you both. 6 months later. The garden of the Valenti estate was in full bloom. The security was tighter now, run by Dante, who had decided that living in luxury was better than living in a sewer, provided he got to punch people occasionally. Elara sat on the stone bench, watching Leo teach a very large, very scary-looking bodyguard how to play hopscotch. She looked down at her hand. The massive emerald-cut diamond was still there, but the heavy platinum band next to it was new. Thinking of running away? Lorenzo stepped up behind her. He rested his hands on her shoulders, his touch warm and familiar. He wasn't wearing a suit today, just a white linen shirt and trousers. He looked younger, lighter. Elara leaned her head back against him, closing her eyes. I tried that once. Didn't work out. I ended up in a shootout in the Bronx. Lorenzo chuckled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. A tragic failure on your part. He walked around the bench and sat next to her, taking her hand. He ran his thumb over the scar on her shoulder, visible beneath her sundress. The contract expires in 6 months, Lorenzo said quietly. Technically, you can take the money and go. You can have your old life back. No guards, no guns. Elara looked at him. She looked at the sharp line of his jaw, the dark eyes that used to terrify her, but now looked at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. She looked at Leo, laughing in the distance. She had saved a boy and woke up in a nightmare. But somehow, in the blood and the chaos, She had built a dream. "I think I'll renegotiate the terms," Elara said, lacing her fingers with his. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what are your demands, Mrs. Valenti?" Elara smiled, pulling him in by his shirt collar. "A lifetime contract, no exit clause." Lorenzo smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He leaned in, closing the distance between them. "Deal." As they kissed, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the estate. The world outside was still dangerous. There would always be rivals, always be wolves at the door. But inside the walls, the lion and his queen were finally, truly home. From a waitress in a diner to the queen of the New York underworld, Elara didn't just survive the Mafia. She conquered its king. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories of dangerous love, twisted betrayals, and unexpected romance, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a chapter. What would you do if you woke up married to a stranger? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.